welcome. Welcome to Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World. I'm Richard Dugan, your host here on this program that brings you choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true. We are here on Sundays at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m., Monday mornings at 1 a.m., Wednesdays at 9 a.m., streaming live at those times at richarddugan.com with a podcast list that spans Spotify and SoundCloud, iTunes Radio, iHeartRadio, many other locations. And we have a video cast, which is on YouTube, where you can watch these interviews, watch these conversations. And we also ask that if you can support the work we're doing financially, I would be gratefully appreciative if you can. If you can't, that's fine. We're not sitting here, as I've said many times, folks, I worked 15 years for Christian radio stations. Matter of fact, speaking of 15 years, we're celebrating our 15th year here on Tell Me Your Story. Started on September 7th of 2007. Anyway, back to the Christian radio station. And I heard this over and over and over again. If you don't support the work that we're doing here, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to have to go off the air. To which I would say under my breath, then go off the air. I'm not going to play that game. If you can support us, I thank you. And those who have, I cannot thank you enough for the support that you've given us financially, but also energetically. And then, leaving that aside for the moment, I also ask that you take time during the decade of perfect vision. I can't believe we're already and it is the fourth year of the decade of perfect vision, the 2020s. It started with 2020, and spend some time going within and listening to that still small voice, which is a subject. It's going to be a major subject we're going to talk about on this program today. It will do you so much good just to sit there quietly, calmly in meditation. One of my guests said, even if it's just 60 seconds, you don't necessarily want to do that at a traffic light when you're sitting at a red, but please take the time to do that. Our guest today is going to enlighten us on the work that she has been about. We'll find out for how long here in just a moment. But she has been working, as we all have, to make this world a better place. Her name is SophiaDemas. She has a couple of books available for you on her website, SophiaDemas.com. Consciousness Beyond Death, the stories of signs, messages, and timing. That is one of the books. And also her earlier release of The Divine Language of Coincidence, How Miracles Transformed My Life After I Began Paying Attention. First of all, Sophia, thank you so much for being with us here on the program. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Well, thank you for having me.
I do have to say that the word in this title of the book, The Divine Language of Coincidence, I've pronounced that word differently these days. Well, for many, many years. And I don't say coincidence anymore. It's coincidence. Incidents that and it's not random. I mean, we'll talk about that. I don't think it's random. These events that sort of continue to reinforce that we are all connected, we are all one, and we are all working on our stuff, and we get, shall we say, assistance from one another. And those that we get assistance from, Sophia, I venture you probably feel the same way. They are part of what Dr. Newton of the Life Between Lives research says is part of our cluster of entities that we travel through. And even though time is a human construct, we travel through time and space, or maybe just say eternity, living out lives that we change roles, and which is kind of cool. I myself have been a part of a program here in Santa Barbara called the Santa Barbara Revels. Last year, we put on a presentation called the Scottish Solstice Celebration that we performed at Christmas time. This year, it has to do with the solstice celebration at Ellis Island in 1924. and I get to play, and I don't know what my role is yet because we just started rehearsals, but I'm part of the choir. And, but we change roles in this, shall we call it this existence, this reality. Talk to us a little bit about this concept of coincidences, especially on that divine level. How did you discover? What was it that told you, and now that and that you knew? It wasn't something you believed. You just knew in your bones, as it says in Stranger in a Strange Land. You grokked it.
It didn't happen overnight. It was a process. And it started when I was 19, and I was going through I had two issues. It was existential angst that I'm sure every 19-year-old goes through. But there were these two issues that I felt were unsolvable. And within a very short period of time, within a couple of months, I had a dream, and I had met this man. And what happened, my two, in a very short period of time, my two issues were solved. I was transformed into someone else. I grew up into womanhood, into I became a different person, and that did not get lost on me. It was like, how can this happen? So I began paying attention, and more things happened, and I would tell people, oh, my latest miracle, and and people would say, well, these things only happen to you. And it was a little annoying because I'm not special, I'm not a yogi or a saint or anything. And then about 12 years ago, I reconnected with a childhood friend, and I told her my latest miracle. And she said, oh, these things only happen to you. And something clicked. And I mean, these things happen to a lot of people, but the number, the volume of events, made me think about it. And what I came to believe is my secret, which is not really a secret, was that these coincidences turned into miracles, or getting exactly what I needed at just the right time when I took action. When I let it, if I had just said, oh my God, what a coincidence, it would have remained a coincidence. But by taking action, it elevated to getting a gift.
Wow. And that, to me, that one word, action, or two words, taking action, I think is the key in that respect. I myself, throughout my life, have said about my career, my personal life, etc., my whole life, every part of it, that I have always seemed to be in the right place at the right time. Now, I'm not saying I live under a lucky star, that everything has been hunky-dory. Hell, I've been through a divorce. I have filed bankruptcy twice in my lifetime. None of those were real fun things to do. And yet, number one, here I am talking to you after all this time of going through the things that I have gone through. Now, I haven't taken the perspective you have by saying, okay, taking action, and suddenly it's a miracle. But in hindsight, if I may quote myself, 2020, I could look back and say, yeah. I mean, I've also suffered through, and I don't know how much suffering there was, the loss of my eldest sister and my father just this year. And yet, they're both with me. They're both here. And then my best friend of 53 years, which I'm a guy who likes milestones. And the bigger the milestone by number, the better. I remember when we celebrated, you and I, we've known each other 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. And then it hit 53, and then I lose him in the material world. And I tried one day to try to cry over his loss. And every time I thought about him, I couldn't do anything but laugh because of how much fun he and I had together. And he's part of my cluster. And I hope to God he comes back sometime soon to make me laugh in the present. That would be fun. But there was a television program. I believe it was, oh my gosh, I'm trying to remember I had it at one point, the title of the show. And it had to do with, and it was the main character, the actor was Kiefer Sutherland. And he had a son in the show, a short little curly-haired young boy who had autism but didn't speak, but communicated in other ways. What they did with the show was they told 4 or 5 separate stories in the first, say, 30 minutes. In the second 30 minutes, those stories began to intersect one after the other, and I don't know if people got the message that it showed how we are connected, how we are one, how all of our decisions, they aren't made for us. We choose. But it's like you were talking just a moment ago. You took action when certain things happened. And suddenly, voila, a miracle. You probably, it's second nature to you now, or are you still keeping yourself, shall we say, conscious of and totally aware that, coincidence. Okay, I need to take action now. But it's more quick actions because because there's a miracle coming. I don't know what it's going to be. I don't know if it's for me, but doesn't matter. I need to take action.
I don't think about it. And that's how I learned that I instinctively took action. I'll tell you, I think that I believe that there's a divine intelligence that better what's best for us than we do.
Mm-hmm.
Cleverly communicates with us in a variety of ways. And one of these ways is putting these little coincidences in our path, because this divine intelligence wants us to be happy and find our true purpose. So we it's our choice. I mean, we can do something with it or let it go. And you can just, oh, wow, what a coincidence. And then it just remains a coincidence.
Mm-hmm.
So I believe that we're all on different levels of spiritual growth. Okay, so this can answer your question. I believe that most people are sort of down here and look at things from the perspective of wishful thinking. So you're wishing something, the coincidence happens, you go, wow, what a coincidence. And you continue wishing, no action. Then something else happens, keep on wishing. And then there's another level that I consider to be from the perspective of hope. Now you're aware. Here's a coincidence. Now, I'm going to take action and hopefully I'll get my miracle. And then finally you get to this place of faith, the perspective of faith, where it's wonderful. I mean, I'm human, so I'm not there all the time, but once you're there and you have faith that everything is provided for you for the best end, then you don't worry. You don't worry about anything, because if something great happens, you go, thank you, thank you, thank you. And if there's obstacles in your way, then, it's a message not to go that way. And how many times have I thanked God for these obstacles? Like thinking, oh, I met Mr. Wonderful. Oh my God, he's just so wonderful. And then things happened and it didn't go anywhere. And I'm like, oh my God, what? I can't believe it. And then So now when I look back, these Mr. Wonderfuls, they either ended in jail or they died or they went nuts, so that it's just this wonderful knowing.
You are, oh, I shouldn't say you're doing this. I am filled with enthusiasm and excitement over this, because as you're talking, my mind is throwing images into my head, into my movie theater, of those types of events that have happened in my life. And what's interesting is some of them, by other people's, shall we say, judgment or assessment, weren't exactly good things, like a divorce, like filing twice a bankruptcy in my lifetime, and the list goes on. And yet, one of the things I want to ask you about as we continue here is the subject of choices, which I have certainly made reference to more than one occasion, and we'll make more references to it as we continue here on Tell Me Your Story. I'm Richard Dugan, and I'm here with Sophia Demas, and we're talking about the work that she is doing. I just love the way you're putting this, because it adds a whole new perspective for me. But I want to talk about choices. And the phrase that we use, one of our slogans, is that we are giving people choices and knowledge of those choices to help make their dreams come true. Now, yes, we have free will. That is true. But there comes a point in one's awareness, and I'm sure you're probably here, and you say that this whole process has become second nature to you. You don't think about it, you just do it. I, at one point in being, I will say, tested by the still small voice I call my friend, I was bicycling back in Phoenix, heading for work, and I was bicycling through farm fields. They were about a mile square. And at one point, I got this prompting, okay, up at this next intersection, I want you to turn right. And then when you get up a mile, you'll turn left, and get another mile, you'll turn left again, and you'll come right back down to the same street that you're on right now, but you'll be a mile further down the road and then continue on. And I'm going, are you crazy? It adds 3 miles to my trip. What's the deal? I went half a mile past that intersection, and the prompting got stronger and stronger. Now, bear in mind, I still had free will. I could have said, no, I'm continuing on to work. But I didn't. I turned around, I went back to that intersection, and then I did the loop around and came back down. I don't know. The only thing I can conclude is, and I sort of have given up the need to know why, but I concluded that I didn't avoid an accident. I didn't do this. It wasn't so much the butterfly effect that I have now changed the world. It was more, oh, I'm being tested. Am I serious about listening to and following the promptings? And sometimes we get that. Now, I haven't had that in a long time, but there is something I wanted to throw out to you. I do want to get back to the whole thing of choices, but what's your perspective on deja vu? Because I was a 7-year-old kid, and I had an entire day. Every time I turned around, I've been here before, and yet I'd never been there before. I've done this before, but I had never done that before. What are your thoughts on what, from your perspective, what does deja vu mean to you?
Well, I know that I've had those feelings, but it's not a predominant thing.
Mm-hmm.
I do believe in past lives, and one of the explanations that I can tell myself is that it's because you get a glimpse from a past life.
Mm-hmm.
It's not predominant in my daily life, so I really can't talk about it.
Okay, I understand. For me, my perspective has been over the years, and I haven't had them lately, and I think I know why, but it was, for me, the universe, the divine, telling me, sort of nudging me just a little bit, saying, no, you're doing fine, keep trusting, because maybe at that moment I wasn't 100% trusting. And so it would throw those up at me saying, yep, You're going the right way. It was like a little signpost, detour sign, so to speak. Okay, turn this way. All right, go this way. But back to choices. And we have free will. And yet, on the one hand, if and I have, maybe not 100%, but I'll say 99%, turned my choices over to the divine. In other words, I am trusting that I'm being guided in the direction that I need to go. But there will be those who will challenge that and say, well, wait a minute. How do you know that that voice you're hearing, that prompting you're getting is from the divine? I mean, we've got people who claim that they get messages from the divine, but they're killing people. They're mass murderers. They're serial killers. They're whatever the antisocial behavior we'll call it in this world. So how do we define that? And then let's get into that whole aspect of, so to speak, giving up my will, if you will, my free will to the divine.
Well, I mean, you said a lot there.
Sorry.
No, I mean, it's true, because another job of a coincidence is to not just nudge you towards what is best for you, but also to tell you that you're on the right path. So I do agree with that. But I think that what you're describing is the inner voice. And that is another method that the divine communicates with us. And when you say, how do you know? Again, it's a process. The more you hone this inner voice, and then you follow the direction, and then you see the gift that you get, then you trust it more. So next time, it's not really a choice. It's like, well, of course, if this urging, I can't. Well, I have described many times in the first book where the nudging is impossible to ignore. It's just impossible. And every time it's the right thing to do. So it's a process that keeps growing. And when I have that urge, I just do it. And also, I also pay attention to, because messages also come from other people. So if somebody says, you have to meet this person, I will pick up the phone, contact them. If they say, you have to read this book, you have to read this book, I do it. When I hear that conviction, I do it. So it's a process.
Oh, yeah. The challenge for a lot of folks, and I have to say that as unique as the ideas put forth in our founding documents are, as unique as those ideas are, there's a certain element of almost it's a sort of a mixed bag here of sabotage in regards to listening to and following the still small voice, if you will, the divine, and really pushing the whole individualistic aspect. And maybe that's part of the plan, that these ideas needed to be put forth to say, do you see how over time this concept doesn't really work, does not serve you? And, as a matter of fact, that's the first time I actually came to that realization right here, right now with you, is it was necessary for them to pen those rulings. And in a matter of speaking, yes, as some have said, these founding documents were divinely inspired, but not divinely inspired to reinforce the ideas in those documents, but again, to show how, if I may use this word, unsustainable they are, because in a matter of speaking, are they not irrelevant on the spirit level? Maybe the human level, they're relevant, but when you get into my father, he's on the other side. How do those elements apply? I'd like to think my dad is happy now. But what are your thoughts in that regard? And we're not going political here. I'm just saying that sometimes we forget that the divine, as you've already alluded to, puts this kind of stuff in our path to show us the paradox, if you will, the illogic aspects of man's ideas, the human ego-centered personality ideas, shall we say, in contrast to what the divine is really trying to show us?
Well, I'm going to touch on free will, okay? Because I'm a very willful person. Like, I make a decision and that's it. So I had made some decisions in my life. And one was I was not going to get married. I was not going to have any kids because my careers, I had 3 successful different careers. And the one thing for sure was not going to happen. I was not going to write a book. Okay. So somehow this divine intelligence knew better than me. And a series of events happened. Lucky for me, I had my mind open ajar, even though the decision was made. So I was very successful single person until the age of 45, when I met Frank, and I married him. And then it was 12 years ago when one of my mentors, Father Stephen, who I think, along with Jimmy Carter, is they're the closest thing to Jesus, and he opened up these shelters, covenant houses, for homeless youth, and he introduced me to this beautiful teenage girl that had found herself in the shelter. She was from Istanbul.
Mm-hmm.
The story of abuse and abandonment this person went through was just unimaginable, and re-traumatized, abuse on every level. And anyway, long story short, we adopted her. So my new favorite holiday was Mother's Day, and now she's married to her architect husband and living in Greece. She just got her 3rd master's. She's working for Pfizer as a biostatistician. And I mean, the joy that I've had because of these 2 people, and then I've written 2 books. I mean, how does that work? I mean, I have my will. These were decisions I had made, but paying attention to the not just what was put in my path, but also listening to my inner voice for guidance.
We're talking with Sophia Demas. SophiaDemas.com is the website. I certainly hope that you will go to her website. Check out these 2 books in particular, Consciousness Beyond Death, and also her earlier memoir, The Divine Language of Coincidence, or as I like to pronounce it, coincidence. It's one of the things I love about the British is how they change the pronunciation of words, Sophia. Laboratory. Yes, indeed. Or aluminium. I'm sorry, where is that on the periodic table? Which I used to know, actually. I used to know the periodic table, but I've let a lot of that stuff go. We're talking with her here on Tell Me Your Story. I'm Richard Dugan, and I want to ask you a little bit about this aspect of one's memoirs. Now, if I may ask, at what age? I'm not asking how old you are now, but at what age did you write your memoir?
Well, my age is no secret, so I'm going to be 72 this October. And I wrote it on 2011 was a big year for me. I turned 60. I started the book. I met my daughter to be the person that became my daughter. And it was something that was so not planned. I had a medium which I had no desire to go see a medium, but the way things happened, which I write about in the first book, and she was this, world famous medium that shows up here to headline the body mind spirit convention in New Jersey. And somehow it's so bizarre the way it happened, but I came face to face with this medium, and she told me that I was going to write a book. And I just said to her, I said, I'm sorry, but that's not in the cards. Okay. I said, number one, I said, I have nothing to say. But two, I'm a people person, and there's no way that I'm going to sequester myself somewhere and write a book. And she just let me argue. And when I was finished, she said, word for word, she said, Spirit says, when she's ready, there are many spirits here to help her and many hands on earth. And that's how it came down. But at that moment, when she said that, I went, well, just because I thought to myself, just because you're good or you're world famous doesn't mean you get it right every time, and I just dismissed it. And there it is,
Mm-hmm. And it's one of those things where a lot of times, again, even though we have free will, the universe just keeps prompting and prompting and prompting. I don't want to say it's coercion, but there is a certain element of that on the part of the divine that says, look, I really, really need you to choose to do this. And you might understand down the road, but your understanding is irrelevant. It's kind of like resistance is futile. Well, understanding is futile because it doesn't matter whether you understand. And I'm curious as to maybe that's the reason why so many people fight those promptings. They hear the voice, they feel the promptings, but they say no, and they turn the ball game up louder, or they turn the party up louder, or they turn whatever it is in their world, in this reality, up louder so that they can drown that out.
Well, I'll tell you something. I feel like being here on Earth is like being in a laboratory. Okay. Mm-hmm. And I am not the person I was 40 years ago. Okay.
Thank you very much for saying that. I have to pass that on to someone in my regards as well, but continue.
So 40 years ago, I was for capital punishment. Yeah, kill them all, get them off the streets, kill them. We're paying too much to have them in jail, just kill them. And now, even if somebody did a horrific thing to somebody that is close to me, God forbid, I could never, ever say, yes, we're going to schedule this person to die. It's just not anywhere near me. So I believe that when you take the messages of, I'm not talking religion, I'm talking the messages of the messenger, Jesus, correct, Buddha.
Yeah.
If you take their way, Jesus never said, worship me. All he said was, follow my way. Buddha too. So, if you align yourself, I used to be very materialistic. And I love beauty and beautiful things more than anyone, but I don't need them. Something else has happened. I derive like a real satisfaction when I know that I've really helped somebody in some way. I get the gift, and in my first book, it's a memoir, so of course it's mostly chronological, except for 2 chapters. And one is titled Please, which is about prayer. And the other one is Thank You, which is about gratitude, which I believe is the highest form of prayer. And so I'm not talking about formal prayer. you just ask. You
Mm-hmm.
ask for what you want, and then you say thank you. And in fact, in that chapter, the please chapter, and in those two chapters, the miracles are more thematic. But in that chapter, I found out, like, I don't know, 20 some years ago, I was going to have lunch in Rittenhouse Square here in Philadelphia, and there were 3 benches that were empty, and one had a book on it. So of course I go to the bench with the book, and the book was titled something like "You Were Not Born Naked," or something like that. It was a very strange title, and I look at in the back, and it was authored by a Catholic monk that was a student of A Course in Miracles, which has altered my life. Okay, it has completely added to my life. And that book was the most beautiful writing on forgiveness. And it made me, Greek is my first language, and the Lord's Prayer was first written in Greek. It was said, Jesus told his apostles the prayer in Aramaic,
Mm-hmm.
but it was written in Greek. And the first thought in my head, it was just so beautiful, was, wait a second, the word forgiveness is not in the Greek version.
Oh.
And I went through line by line, and I can't tell you how much people have missed out if they don't get the Greek version. So I retranslated it, and I got the blessings of my friend, Father Dimitrios Kostandelos, who is a world-famous, world-known Greek scholar and theologian, and I got his blessing on it. And it's the perfect prayer. And so now I forgot what you asked me. I think I went.
Oh, that's fine. The thing that really gets me is this aspect of translation. Now, I'm curious, what did the word that we have in the English version that you say does not appear in the Greek version, what did the English word forgiveness actually translate to?
Okay. So, forgiveness, there's a good way of forgiving and a not so good way of forgiving. So I can say to you, okay, I'll forgive you, but don't you ever forget it. Or I could say to you, look, let's just turn the page, let's forget about it, and just pretend it never happened. Let's just move on. So in the Greek version, it's more like, instead of forgiving somebody, it's free us from that which keeps us back. Like, free us from any obligatory thing. Free us, and we free, our enemies. Free them from guilt. Mm-hmm. That's basically what it is you can use forgiveness to keep somebody feeling guilty, or you free them. You lift it.
Yeah. And that's interesting. And I'm going to do a little detour here, just very briefly, in regards to translation. I've said this many, many times on this program. Now, I know a little bit about the Hebrew alphabet, the 22 characters. And each one of them, as I did my research, has its own legend. It has its own color, its own numerical reference, its own tone. It's like on a map. You see all of those different symbols and so forth. Well, each of these letters has that kind of a legend. Then you start putting letters together in words. a whole new legend. Words into sentences, sentences into paragraphs, into chapters, into a book. And you have an incredible, I'm going to coin a friend of mine, his book called The Mosaic. You have an incredible mosaic. And then when you translate it into other languages, guess what happens? That legend goes away. Now, my point is this. A gentleman that I happened to listen to on one of these YouTube shorts made reference to the fact that in the 10 Commandments, one of the commandments is, thou shalt not kill. You'd think I know what number it is. I was born and raised Catholic, and we had to memorize that for a test. Needless to say, he says the word kill is incorrect. In the correct translation, it's the word murder. And I'm sitting here going, okay, we've had this book for maybe 1,500 years. And granted, yes, they probably wrote it a little earlier than that. But in terms of accessibility to the general public, after Gutenberg and his printing press, and the word hasn't been changed from kill to murder. So I challenge that assertion that word in whatever the original language was, Hebrew, Aramaic, whatever, actually is murder. Because if it were, it would have been changed in somebody's translation. And that's kind of the thing that I get to when it comes to books, whether they be ancient wisdom teachings, as I like to call them, or otherwise, that were written the original language was A, translated into B, okay, what was lost? And so maybe it would be better if we learned that original language so we would know really what was being said. Matter of fact, I have a book that was really very profound for me, that was written, or I should say channeled, by a gentleman by the name of Johannes Graeber. And the book back in the 30s, he was also a Catholic priest, by the way. And the book was not too complimentary. The channel was not too complimentary of Catholicism back then. But nonetheless, he also translated a version of the New Testament. And there's a passage in there, seek ye first the kingdom of God and all his righteousness, and all these things will be added unto you. His translation, which makes a heck of a lot more sense to me, is seek ye first communication with the spirit world of God, etc., etc. What are your thoughts in that regard? And is that where we really need to go within to get sort of guidance on translation or meaning, and meaning for us as an individual? Not, okay, I got the meaning here. This is what everybody should now believe.
Well, I believe that this book has Jesus's message. Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, I mentioned A Course in Miracles. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you're familiar with it.
Yes, I have several copies.
Okay. Well, I write about this because it was slapping me in the face for like 2.5 years from different sources. And I absolutely was not going to read this book. When I literally tripped on it. And I thought, okay, I was considering reading it. And then I looked at it, and it looked too much like the Bible, like thin little pages with numbers on the paragraphs. And I'm not going to do this. And it kept slapping me in the face. And finally, I was forced to read this book. And one of the reasons of resistance was that it was channeled. Mm-hmm. And it was almost, I read it the second time, was absolutely beautiful because it's very obtuse. When you can read the sentence 3 different times and it's 3 different meanings. But the second time I read it was truly beautiful. I found it truly beautiful. And it was almost like Jesus was like, okay, I came down to show you my way, and you killed me or murdered me or whatever word you want to say.
Yeah.
and then okay, so how should I do my message? How can I give you my message now? So he selected a woman to channel through, which I thought was brilliant of Jesus, because
have long sleeves.
I beg your pardon. Go ahead.
I don't know. Okay, so it was as Jesus thought, okay, who can I choose to channel my message? So he chose this woman who happened to be on the faculty of the Columbia University Medical School in psychiatry, who was a Jew. And I thought this was just so perfect because, she's not, she has a career, she's not going to risk, putting this out there with, this esteemed career being on the medical faculty.
Mm-hmm.
So she agreed to, it took her 7 years to write, Helen Schuckman, took her 7 years to write this. And I have to tell you one thing that, how many times this book gave me exactly what I needed. But in the book, threading through the first book is my relationship with my husband. Frank, I discovered early on that he had some real anger issues, like he was a rager. And finally I went, bye-bye, because I could. Okay, bye. And it got to the point where I said to myself, I moved out with a friend. I never want to see this jerk ever again. Okay, now again, my will said never. Well, 3 amazing coincidences happened in a matter of 2 months. And the first one was being open to open that book. And I opened it to the healed relationship. And I was like, no, I don't want to read this. But that's my rule. When you open it, you have to read it. And so that opened me up. Basically, what it said was, God is in everyone. And if your brother comes to you with his hand outstretched and you say no to your brother, you say no to God. And I'm like, oh, God, I can't do that. So that opened me to actually agreeing to meet with him. And then was the second huge, amazing thing that disarmed me. And then the third thing was a book. And the way that third, how the coincidence went into a miracle is really incomprehensible to me still.
Wow.
And that was in 2009. And I am now married to my dream companion. He's not only healed, he's transformed. He is spirit. What a gift. So, how does that work? So those teachings, and they come your way. I'm sure. And you seem very fortunate to be privy to these things.
I was fortunate also to be given, at the age of 21, a book called The Impersonal Life. Now, prior to that, my metaphysical primer has been, at the age of 17, Autobiography of a Yogi. But I also take the Impersonal Life that was given to me by my dear friend Ramona, who has also left this earth. Ironically, she left in the month of March, as did my father and my elder sister. Interesting. There's a connection there. There's a coincidence or coincidence there. And I don't need to know why. All I know is, wow, that's pretty cool. Anyway, she gave me this book. And we were conversing one day, and she says, she asked me if I were trapped on a desert island and I could have one book, what would it be? And in my case, it probably would be autobiography. In her case, it was The Impersonal Life, because it's a channeled book. And again, it was channeled back, I believe, in the 1930s, if not earlier, by James Banner. And there are several other books as well that he channeled. But it's fascinating because it's a conversation. Actually, it's a one-sided conversation between God or the divine and you, and talking about a myriad of different subjects, including one I'd like to talk about also, reincarnation, as we continue here on Tell Me Your Story. I'm Richard Dugan with Sophia Demas and SophiaDemas. That's DEMAS. SophiaDemas.com is the website, and we hope that you'll go there to check out the two books that we've been sort of alluding to and tapping into. But let me ask you about this aspect of reincarnation. I mean, I've talked with a lot of different people on this program, and they all tend to agree, yeah, reincarnation, it's been there in all of the ancient wisdom teachings, the philosophies down through the centuries, with maybe the one exception that the powers that be within Christendom in the early days decided they better take it out because it gives people too much freedom to screw around in this life. And then, hey, I'll correct everything in the next life. I've known about reincarnation all my life, and I've never spent time screwing around. I've had fun. I've been happy. But, it's like, I also believe in karma, cause and effect. Every action, for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. But when you start throwing in the concept of reincarnation, having lived past lives, oh my God, the floodgates open in terms of, okay, where did I do this that I now have to pay for it or fix it or whatever? Which past life did I I'll use the term messed up, because I don't believe we ever really make mistakes. We have life lessons or lessons learned. There are no mistakes. I mean, so what you're telling me is that Edison, he made 990 mistakes. No, he didn't. He learned from each one of those. Anyway, so talk to us a little about your perspective, your perceptions of how reincarnation plays into this, especially in terms of divine guidance, but then, of course, counterbalancing that or mixing it in with the aspect of karma.
Okay. I experienced something very bizarre enough that I felt it happened to me so that I could tie loose ends with someone from a past life. So much so that I had a past life regression happen and the answer came. So I believe it. It's just that I do not want to come back. I do not want to come back. And I feel that God, divine intelligence, has put a lot of things in my path to do so that I don't come back. Mm-hmm. So, and it basically it's helping people.
Right.
Helping. And this is how I derive a satisfaction, and you know what? I'll tell you something very exciting. As you probably know, reincarnation, near-death experiences have been studied by scientists for decades.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's okay to write about those things. And I've got to tell you what's really exciting for me right now, that scientists have gotten interested in both of my books. So I knew that scientists were studying consciousness, but I had no idea that there were scientists studying coincidence. I had no idea.
Ooh.
And so I've been in contact, so there's an outfit. It's amazing how these things happen, but you should look it up. It's the Scientific and Medical Network out of the UK. And the executive director is David Lorimer. So he does a book brief every month. And so he interviews a scientist and then features their book. And he invited me to be his guest for September and featuring both of my books. And so, then he also invited me to help plan and participate in the Synchronicity Summit at the end of October.
Oh,
so it's
cool.
me and 14 scientists, but so I'm telling you this because science is catching up to us. Okay. So I was I was in contact with Dr. Eben Alexander, who wrote the book Proof of Heaven.
Mm-hmm.
And he loved the book, my first book, and asked for the second, the manuscript to endorse my second book. And then I hear from him and he goes, "Oh, I'm sorry, I can't endorse your second book. I can't endorse this book because there's not sufficient discussion of consciousness." And I'm like, huh? And I realized that that was code. Okay, this is code. What he was saying to me was, "Oh, I'm a neurosurgeon. I can die and go to heaven, come back and write about it because, it's an NDE. Scientists have been like studying this forever."
Mm-hmm.
So then I thought, okay, I'm gonna ask one of the scientists to endorse my book, who studies coincidence. And he writes back and he goes, "Oh, I'm sorry, I can't endorse your book because it's not my field." So then this David Lorimer sends me 2 articles on after-death communication that he co-authored. And it was, except the examples given were like old, like from the Victorian times or the turn of the century.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm reading this and I'm like, "Oh, wow, I can't believe this." 3 days later, the scientist who studies coincidence writes me and says, "Since I received your email, I have received a flurry of after-death communication information, and I will endorse your book." So now, just in time for my second book, a new scientific field has emerged, ADC, after-death communication. I'm so excited. So they're catching up. The scientists are. And the thing is that this idea of consciousness having intelligence, it's known. Scientists know about it, and basically, my position with it is that, okay, the coincidence happens, you take action. And what happens at that moment when you let go and let God do the cooking, okay, what you do is you and this divine intelligence co-create. And the miracle comes to you as a co-creation.
There's another element I want to get into before we wrap up our program, because it's a story that I heard. I loved the story because it really resonated with me. Once again, don't know why, doesn't matter. But what does matter is that you folks are listening to a conversation between yours truly and Sophia Demas, SophiaDemas.com, here on Tell Me Your Story. I'm Richard Dugan, your host, and I wanted to touch upon this little story here that I was told or I heard. I can't remember exactly, but it doesn't matter. The story goes like this. There are 2 gentlemen, and we'll call one Frank, and we'll call one Bob. And they go out to breakfast one morning, and they're having a wonderful conversation. They're really good friends, kind of like my friend Doug and I, who I knew for 53 years before he decided to leave. And at the end of the meal, Bob picks up the check, looks at it, reaches into his pocket, pulls out exactly the amount, and they go on their way. A few weeks later, they get together for lunch, sit down again, have wonderful conversation, great meal. The bill comes. Bob takes the bill, reaches into his pocket, and pulls out exactly the amount needed. Now, about 2 weeks later, they get together for dinner. And they're sitting there once again. It's a marvelous conversation, nice back and forth and so forth. And then the bill comes, and Bob picks up the check and reaches into his pocket and pulls out exactly the amount needed. And Frank says, "Bob, I first of all, I want to thank you for buying, the last few meals that we've had together. But I just have one question. How is it that you always have exactly the right amount in your pocket to pay the bill?" And he says, "Well, let me tell you this little story. I was cleaning out my garage one day and I came across this lamp and it was really, really dusty. So I started to dust it off, and all of a sudden out pops this smoke and this genie appears saying, "You have one wish and you cannot wish for more wishes." So he thinks about it. He says, "Can I get back to you in a couple of days?" He says, "I will be here." Comes back a couple of days. I come back a couple of days later and I say, "I know what my wish is. My wish is to have what I need at the time I need it, monetarily and, of course, otherwise. And your wish is my command." And boom. And that is how he's able to do this. Now, I thought, wouldn't that be wonderful? Would I love to have multiple zeros before the decimal point in my bank account? Sure, who wouldn't? But to quote Jesus, "Do you see the birds in the air? Look at them. They are not toiling. They don't work. And yet your Father takes care of them. They live and they love and they are happy, and et cetera, et cetera. Why are you worrying about what you are going to eat or what you're going to wear, where you're going to sleep tonight, et cetera, et cetera?" You know, the birds are cared for. Trust in God, trust in your Father, trust in God, et cetera, et cetera. So I thought, well, why would that be such a bad thing to live like that? Isn't it true that 100 to 150 years ago, there was no such thing as retirement? You lived until you died. You worked until you died, but it wasn't always necessarily work. It's just what you did. And now we have retirement and we have vacations and we have all of this stuff in our modern day. And I'm thinking, does this really mesh with the divine, we'll call it the divine protocol? And then again, it goes back to what you and I have already alluded to, and that is maybe these things have been put in place here to show us this isn't the direction that we should be going as human beings. That back then, where you just did what you did while you were alive, if you had kids, you had kids to help out and so forth. And then one day you decide, I'm going to leave, and you leave. What are your thoughts in regards to accumulating stuff, wealth, etc., as opposed to Mother Nature? What animal other than human beings stores up for more than one season?
Oh, that's such a good, thought-provoking question. Because again, just looking at my life, I was materialistic. I loved beautiful clothes and beautiful jewelry and art, and I just had to have these things. And it's taken like a whole 180 now, and I do feel the need for security. I could care less about any. I don't think I'm going to buy another article of clothing until I die. 6 years ago, I told my husband, no more jewelry. And because there are other things that give me satisfaction. I love looking at beautiful things, and I'd rather have I had a 1966 red Mustang that I absolutely loved. And now I want a safe car. I want something that's safe.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like I know exactly where you're going. If I had to, I think about with all these disasters, well, I look at these people that their possessions are instantly gone. And you see them and they're just thankful that their family is safe. And so I don't wish that on anyone, but it is for us to learn that we can survive that, and so we can live moment to moment and we'll be just fine. We're just programmed to have things. I think.
Too, the other element too is, everybody's talking these days about insurance. Now, I happen to live in an area here in Santa Barbara up on the mountain in actually what is wilderness country. It's the Los Padres National Forest. We had renter's insurance up until 2 years ago. And our insurance company said, yeah, we're not renewing. And I understand why. I'm not, I'm not upset with them, because why would you be, basically you're throwing money down a well. And they're a business that's in business to make money. All right. I'm not going to take that away from them. That's what they're here to do. That's their role, so to speak. My role or my position is, and when we were evacuated the one time we were evacuated in 2017, fortunately we had the insurance then, and they covered things and so forth. But there was a part of me that was going, boy, I don't really wish this, but there's a part of me that wishes that the fire would just come through and wipe everything out and we just start over. Because I've taken the position in my life to just trust the universe. I'm going to be okay. It's going to be okay. It is okay in the present moment. As a matter of fact, as you and I are speaking right now, I have everything I need. There is nothing at this very moment that I need. I'm complete in this moment, and now in this one, and so on and so forth. Are you able to codify that down so that people start to get it? And I know everybody's perception is different. Everybody's absorption, if you will, or I'll call it the grokking rate, is different. But at the same time, it's like, man, I wish I could just inject this concept into people so they would get it and stop blaming. This is the thing that was saddening to me. And again, my heart goes out to the folks who were devastated by the wildfire in Lahaina. But at the same time, they're complaining that the authorities this and the authorities that. I'm going, wait a minute. I realize it was a fast mover, and we've had them here. We had a town up north that burned to the ground, Paradise. And of course, there were complaints then, but it's like, you're alive. You're still breathing air. You're still able to eat, and you're getting support and so forth. It seems like we've lost the ability to be grateful, I guess, is kind of where I'm going with this. Your thoughts?
Yes, I believe that and a lot of this has to do with learning a lesson, but also what you touched on as far as like, you're alive. I have to tell you, and this is what I hope the second book parlays, is that what I hope people take away from the second book is that the evidence that happened to me, 7 chapters are my experiences and 3 are close friends' experiences. And you can't pick which one is the strangest, but the idea I believe this without a trace of doubt, that when we die, we simply shed our bodies and we are as conscious as you and I are right now. And that to me gives such hope, because I'm astounded at how clever my departed loved ones have been in communicating with me. And what that tells me is that when it's my turn to take the trip, I get to be creative and in communicating with whoever I left behind. So this fear of death, of saying, oh, but I'm alive, because if you were dead, you're dead, right? And so you're dead. But then, you hear about these near-death experiences, people who have experienced this, and they come back, and there's a lot of stories about not wanting to come back. So there's something really good on the other side that we don't have to fear, and I'm so, because the second book kind of wrote itself, because I was trying to cram everything in the first book and it was just too much. So I just instinctively plucked out all the stories that had to do with death. So the second book kind of wrote itself.
Mm-hmm.
But wow, what, I mean, these things, how I don't understand materialistic scientists that really believe that, that the brain is what conjures up a consciousness, so that when you die, there you go, you're done. There's nothing. But basically, what these scientists are now coming to believe, that consciousness is very much what I consider to be God or divine intelligence, and our brains are made to click in like antenna or transmitters or something, and we remain. The last chapter in my book was an experience I had during a guided meditation by a woman who I consider to be an ascended master, and that was the seal. That with that experience, there's no doubt that we simply return whence we came.
Yeah. Which has frustrated me for a while to no end, or did frustrate me to no end, because it's like, okay, the ancient wisdom teachings tell us we come from the one. The ancient wisdom teachings tell us we're going back to the one. So what the hell are we doing here? And again, got to give up the need to know why. Let it go. Just live, be happy, be joyful, serve, give what you can, receive. That's another element too. We'll talk about at another time, but the giving and the receiving, the exchange. I believe that one of the universal laws is there is always an exchange. The universe abhors a vacuum, and there is always an exchange. And there can't be a giver without a receiver, and vice versa. And to that end, we have to also thank you for being a part of Tell Me Your Story. I'm Richard Dugan, and I thank you, Sophia Demas, SophiaDemas.com, for being with us here on the program. My mind is being flooded with more and more questions, and I wish we had more time today on this program, but we will get back together again because I want to continue this conversation. I don't know about you, but I've been feeling this incredibly wonderful welling up when we dive into some of these things deeper and deeper. That is just, I'm so excited. I don't know if you can tell, but this just thrills me that I've connected with you, and that we are able to share what we're sharing on these programs. So I thank you so much for being here, for doing what you're doing, for writing the books you've written, and for making yourself available to the folks who need it and want it, and hopefully will follow.
This was a pleasure.
Well, I have 3 final questions for you before I wrap up, because I ask these questions of all of my guests. I've been doing so for 15 years. Questions have been modified a little bit along the way, but basically the same principle. Before I ask those of you, I want to thank you for listening to and watching Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World. As we are giving you choices, and I'm getting excited once again here, as we're giving you choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true. You know, I told you before, we're here on Sundays at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m., Monday mornings at 1 a.m., 9 a.m. on Wednesdays. That's our special edition of Tell Me Your Story. And you're going to have to tune in to find out what in the heck does that mean. We're also streaming live at those times at richarddugan.com with our podcasts on SoundCloud, iTunes, TuneIn Radio, Spotify, Stitcher, Player FM, Blueberry, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music. You now know why I took a deep breath to get all of that in. We're also on YouTube, where you can watch these interviews. I hope that you'll at least select notification. I'm not sure you can do that without subscribing, but if you can, please do, so that you're notified the next time a conversation is put up here on the cloud, as it were. And also spend time going within. Man, I cannot emphasize that enough, and I'm sure Sophia would echo these words. I can't emphasize enough taking some time, 60 seconds, again, not at a red light, to just pause and just go within, even if it's just being quiet so you're not listening for or to anything. But if you hear the promptings, whatever they may be, of inspiration, encouragement, education, information, etc., that is for you. You want to know where you're going to get unfiltered, non-fake, a personalized, we'll call it news. It's going to be when you go within, and it's for you. I've never liked it when someone at the Christian station would say, Richard, God told me to tell you, and I'm going to tell you, take your information and go elsewhere because God knows my number. I'll even take the call collect. Okay. Also, if you would like to support the work we're doing, and I can't thank those of you who have supported us along the way, and those who will, thank you, thank you, thank you. We have a PayPal account. It's there for your security as well as ours. Just put in my email address, Richard@RichardDugan. Boom. It's greatly appreciated. With that, final 3 questions as we wrap up this edition of Tell Me Your Story. Who is SophiaDemas?
A very, very, very happy woman.
What is your life's purpose?
I believe that it's to help others.
And finally, what was your best day?
Oh, there are countless. That's the hardest question put to me. Best day was I just can't. I mean, it's like finding my daughter, my husband. It all has to do with some other person. I'm thinking of my father, my mother, these amazing, working for Buckminster Fuller and that exchange. I mean, I can think of one wonderful day. I mean, I cannot answer that question.
And I understand. I do indeed. But again, I do thank you for being a part of Tell Me Your Story and being a part of what is making, not as what it's going to, what is making the world a better place. Sometimes it is one person at a time. And again, thank you for being here.
Thank you for what you do.
Well, thank you. And I thank you for listening to and watching Tell Me Your Story. New paradigms for a new world, where we are giving you choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true. And if you haven't heard all of the new choices that I've heard on this program, you need to listen again. And until our next broadcast, podcast, video cast, here we go, folks. Love to Lal. Jeanette, you know I'm still listening. Dad, I'm happy as you are. And we're on opposite sides of the veil, and I'm happy that you're happy. And to my best friend, Doug, Smokey, I will see you on the other side.